It's the same old story. Boy finds girl, boy loses girl, girl finds boy, boy reviews movies on the internet. Let's talk about The Naked Gun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, Daniel's going to introduce what we're going to be doing today.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we are talking about The Naked Gun from 1988, which is a spoof comedy which stars Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin, who is a member of police squad that has to investigate a conspiracy to assassinate Queen Elizabeth. So I've seen this movie a couple of times, and I've seen pretty much all of the other Zucker Abrams movies, and we talked about Airplane a couple of months ago. And I think you guys just saw this one for the first time, right? So what was your impression of The Naked Gun?
I'm a big fan of Pink Panther, right? Now, I am 100% sure that Pink Panther got its influences from Naked Gun. I'm not surprised. I am becoming a big fan of Naked Gun. A lot of the comedies, right, films that I think that I've seen are all right, but I don't really find funny. It feels kind of immature the way that they execute some of the jokes or some of the, you know what I'm saying, just some of the jokes, the way that they execute it just feels very childlike. However, with this one, even though they were acting stupid, it was funny stupid and funny immature. Like, if like what I'm saying is gonna sound very contradicting, but it felt immature but mature at the same time, especially the way that they executed certain jokes, especially with the main police officer or investigator, whatever his title is. I was entertained. I'll be honest, I was very entertained. Of course, maybe there were some jokes which flew over my head, but it doesn't matter. I think the way that they made the film accessible to a wide range of viewers, their audience, you know what I'm saying? Because even though you might not understand everything, like all the jokes, it's still funny. There's many things in this film that is still funny. In terms of the story itself, I think the story itself was cool. I just think mainly it was just the way, it's just the humor of the film is just, that's the highlight for me. Just had a bit of everything. All right story, great jokes. Yeah, it was a good movie overall. Very good movie. I had a very good time.
Me, not so much. I don't think this is my type of comedy. There was a lot of physical comedy in this, especially everything they did around OJ and his injuries, etc. And even the main detective guy, like stuff like they did when he put his hand in the fish tank and stuff like that, which were just stuff that I think were of its time. I don't think we get too much of the physical comedy anymore, but I think it's like very much of its time. And to me, it doesn't translate as well personally to kind of what I'm used to or what I enjoy in comedy. And that was like the main sticking point. And I think there was like a lot of jokes that probably went over my head and I didn't get the references to, which maybe would have helped to kind of bridge that gap a little bit or sort of help me understand a little bit more what they were trying to attempt with the humor. But for me, it was just too slapstick, too on the nose, too silly, and too whatever. I wouldn't say that I was hating it. I wouldn't say it's like, awful. But I just I just was kind of like straight faced most of the time. There were a few that got me. Some stupid ones that somehow worked for me. So like when they're at the baseball game and he's searching everyone and he's like having to, whilst the baseball game is going on, he's having to like find ways to, search people, and like when there's commotions, he's like just going around and like searching everyone. I found that funny. But the laughs were, for me anyways, very few and far. And I think for comedy, the biggest sin you can have in the comedy is just not being funny. And again, I will give it grace because it's probably, the comedy was more of its time.
So a couple of months ago, we talked about Airplane, which also stars Leslie Nielsen. It's made by the same people, has a similarly legendary standing in the history of the genre, right? And it's kind of part of like the series of movies that kind of these people made through the course of the 80s, I think into the early 90s. And you guys quite liked Airplane, right? But this one not so much, right? And I'm kind of with you. It's probably between this Top Secret, which you guys haven't seen yet, and Airplane. I think this comes in at a distant third. It's just like it's got its moments, but it's not nearly as good as the other two, in my opinion. And so I'm curious, why is it that you guys liked Airplane so much, but this one not so much, considering it's made by the same people? A lot of the humor is similar.
I feel like Airplane had a little bit more relatability. And again, I didn't understand all the references in Airplane, but there was stuff that I kind of knew, or like some, terms and things like that that was set in that particular movie that is still common today. So things like how do you like your coffee? Black, like I like my men, or something, whatever said in that movie. It's just like kind of stuff like that are like cultural references that I got and found funny. And I think Airplane wasn't nearly as silly with the physical humor as it was in this particular movie. I think this movie relied a little bit more heavily on the physical humor as opposed to some of the deadpan, just kind of like one line jokes that was in Airplane. And it was in this movie as well, but I think it was just executed a lot better in Airplane as opposed to this movie.
I remember I did enjoy Airplane, but in comparison to this film, I think this one was better for me. I think the way that they just executed their jokes was kind of like, I wouldn't say perfectly done, but it was like smartly done. Like even, I don't know if Hervey, you referred to if this was the scene you're referring to, but when he was searching someone, like he went in, like obviously his partner held the guy, and then when he was searching him, he went into the other guy's pocket, his partner's pockets, and took out a gun. Even though, like, I don't know why I found that funny, but that was funny. So, like, there was just even when he was hanging from the building, and then he ended up accidentally grabbing onto the woman. There's just certain things that were just happening. It was just like smartly done. I was like, yeah, I think it was just smart execution. Even with the main actor in this one, in comparison to the main actor in Airplane, the main actor in Airplane still felt a bit ditzy, whereas he reminds me a lot of the investigator in Pink Panther, even though there was a lot of similarities in terms of their performances. And like I said, it's just the maturity behind the execution of the jokes and just the way that it was executed in terms of it was just smartly done. I think that's, for me, even though it was smartly done in Airplane as well. And there were moments, especially when the little girl said, I like my men black, my coffee black or something, I like my man. Like there's maturity and stuff like that as well, even though that's crazy.
And there's definitely a big subjective component to humor, right? Like where the style is the most important thing, right? Like if you just don't like a particular style of humor, doesn't matter where it's done, it's probably not going to land. I do have some theories on why this movie is not quite up there with Airplane. So one of them is that back when we talked about Airplane, we talked about how the makers of this had some ironclad rules about how to make a comedy. One of those rules is there always has to be something going on. So if there's something serious in the foreground, there has to be a joke in the background. Or if there's a joke in the foreground, there has to be, like, the background has to be serious, right? And they do this sometimes, right? Like, for example, when Drebin and Ludwig talk, right? They have this conversation in the foreground where I think Ludwig kind of introduces himself, and in the background, Drebin is messing with the aquarium. And he's kind of trying to retrieve this priceless pen from the aquarium, which is full of these Japanese fighting fish. And there's a whole bunch of slapstick, and it kind of gets worse and worse. But the dialogue in the foreground is normal, right? It's just normal police procedural dialogue, right? So there's a couple of scenes in which they kind of stick to this rule, but then there's other places where they don't. And specifically in the last bit leading up to the baseball game, there's like nothing funny happening, and also nothing serious happening. Where it feels like there's much more filler than in Airplane, for instance, which had no filler at all, right? Where every scene and every moment has something going on. And if half the jokes don't land, there's still more than enough around. Whereas here, I feel myself drifting off, and then every couple of minutes, there's something funny happens again. Like does that kind of match your experience as well? Like mostly Hervey, right? Because Jonathan, you mostly liked it, right? But Hervey, I'm interested in, does that ring true as to why it's not as engaging as Airplane?
I think you could be correct in that, because there was definitely points where it lost my attention, and I wasn't as invested in what was going on in this movie. And even when they were trying to mix the serious and the comedy at the same time, it didn't always work for me, especially in the scenes between Drebin and Jane. It just, I don't know, it just wasn't landing for me, because again, they were trying to like build this like chemistry in this relationship with them, and it was just like one stupid joke after the other. And I don't know, especially like when they first met and they're just walking down the hallway and she just keeps bumping into stuff, or like, hitting whatever. I was just like, it's just stupid. I don't know. And again, sometimes I do like stupid in movies, but it just was stupid in all the wrong ways. So yeah, I think the mix of it just didn't work. Even when it was there, I just don't think the mix of it worked for me. And then, like you said, there were just parts where there was like a lull in the movie, and I was just a little bit checked out. And to be honest, it actually I know this is only an hour and 25-minute movie. It took me 2 seconds to get through this just because I wasn't having a great time watching the movie. I wasn't invested or enthralled with what was going on. So at the hour or so mark, I was like, okay, I probably should just like pause it here and then I'll finish off the ending at a later point, just because the movie didn't grab me at all.
I do understand where you guys are coming from. I just feel like, okay, so you didn't have that same feeling with Airplane, because didn't you feel like with the main actor, even you, Daniel, because it seems like obviously you prefer Airplane more than this. Didn't you feel like, especially with the main character, they were just a bit too ditzy? Because ditzy can come off as immature. That's why I keep using this word immature, because that's like I don't know if pet peeve is the right word, but that's something that kind of annoys me when it comes to comedy. Not all the time, but majority of the time, especially if I don't understand the jokes and if the jokes don't bang, and then on top of that you got the guy acting ditzy and immature. It annoys me even more. So is it that the jokes in this one just didn't bang, as in like they just weren't good enough, or is it like you were saying of it, like the immaturity and etc.? Didn't you feel that from Airplane?
I think sometimes the jokes overstay their welcome. Go back to the aquarium scene where the fish just keeps like biting him, and it's like getting worse and worse. He's like biting his nose and whatever. I felt like that just went on for a little bit too long. Even OJ at the beginning of the movie, when he's trying to do the shakedown of this gang, and he's like being shot, and it's just like kind of like overplayed. Him being shot and just like stumbling into everything and just like making it worse, and ends up falling into the water. It just kind of felt like all the jokes were just, one, not really hitting initially, and then two, just lasting a little bit too long. And I don't know whether I'm the only one that felt like that, but I keep thinking about it. A lot of the jokes, a lot of it just like included OJ. The ones especially that I didn't like, because I think he had a lot of the physical comedy aspect of it, where it was like really played up about like his injuries and like, the hospital scene where like they're like adjusting the bed and it's like, just making the situation worse every single time.
We saved your husband's arm. Where would you like it sent? That was, it's a fine joke, but it's not that great, right? I feel like actually that is kind of an example of what's going on here, because it's a fine joke, it works, right? But it's like there's not a lot to it. Whereas I always felt like in Airplane, the jokes are a little bit more involved a lot of the time, or they're over very quickly, right? Where if a joke is simple in Airplane, it's usually something in the background, or it's a side gag or something, or if it's more elaborate, then more effort went into it, right? I feel like I brought this entire topic up because I'm actually not that down on the movie. It's just, as far as spoof movies go, I think this one is actually fairly good. Like, it's definitely up there. It's above average, I think. It's just, compared to something like Airplane and Top Secret, which you guys haven't seen, it just pales in comparison. And we know what the people who made this are capable of. And I think in that, like, if you rank it on that curve, then it's not that impressive, right? But I do have a bunch of favorite jokes in this, which we can go to in a minute. But I have like another reason for why I think this is not that amazing. And that is that, do you guys know about Police Squad?
No.
So the movie is called The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. And what this means is there was a TV show a couple of years before this called Police Squad. It's basically this, but as a TV show. I think there's 6 or 7 episodes of it, and it was canceled for being too demanding on the audience, right? It was a lot of the same humor as an Airplane, like lots of detail, lots of very quick side gags, lots of background stuff. And the problem was, the way the story goes is that the show was canceled after a couple of episodes because TV audiences of the time didn't get it. They basically were overwhelmed with having to pay attention so much in order to get it. Like, it's kind of like today we have the cliche of the Netflix movie, which has to be enjoyable as you're doing laundry and cooking dinner and not really paying attention. And this shows that this is not a new idea, that even like 40 years ago, a show that required you to pay attention the entire time was kind of a tough sell on audiences. And so Police Squad was canceled after a couple of episodes. And it's the same character, it's the same kind of thing. Like, in every episode, they have like a case kind of to solve with a similar kind of humor to Airplane. And I feel like they burned all their good jokes in the show. That's kind of my impression. And now they had to kind of use some of their second-rate material to kind of make this movie. Because when you just look up Police Squad clips on YouTube or something, you will probably get stuff from the show. Like 90% of what you get will be from the show, and maybe 10% will be from the movie. I think that has something to do with it as well, which is where they kind of already did all their best jokes, and then they made this movie. I don't know if that's true. I've not researched this, but that's what it feels like, because when you put them side by side, I think the show has a lot more intelligence and care put into the jokes. Whereas here, a lot of them, like a few of them, I think are pretty good, but most of them are fairly basic, right? Like when the O.J. Simpson character, Nordberg, right, is in the hospital bed, and Drebin sits down and kind of the bed folds in on itself, like crushing Nordberg's spine and all of that, right? That is like very basic slapstick, right? There's not a whole lot to it, for example, right? So that's kind of my theory on why this is not quite as compelling.
The worst offense was the peeing and the farting joke that they did when the woman was giving the press conference and his mic was kept on. And that was like another example of a joke dragging for way too long. I don't know why people enjoy it, but I've never found pee, poop, fart jokes really that funny. There was even a line in Sinners where Delroy's character says, like, doesn't even spell that, I think I shit myself. And I'm like, I hate jokes like that. Like, it's really not my thing. So that was kind of like another one where it's like, okay, we're doing a pee joke and a fart joke. And it's like, it's not really that impressive.
I'm not above that kind of humor, like, but I think it's like you have to put in a little bit of wit, right? And a little bit of effort. And I think there's two things going on here. One is, I think you're right, it goes on for way too long, right? The joke that he leaves his mic on, like there's like at least 2 or 3 minutes where we just hear him do his business, right? With the mic on, and people are reacting to it, but it repeats basically the same punchline 7 or 8 times. I don't think it really takes the joke to somewhere else. That is kind of part of it. And I think Airplane would have done that. Airplane would have kept going, and it would have escalated, it would have gone somewhere. And then also I've seen this parodied or referenced in a dozen sitcoms, I'm sure. Like somebody leaves their mic on and then they go to the bathroom, or they say something embarrassing or something. This kind of joke, I think, has been done to death, but which is not the fault of a movie from 1988. But I think that kind of doesn't help, right? So yeah, I think in general, like this is just not quite as involved as some of the better ones. Just to not be entirely negative, did we have any favorite jokes, which stood out and why? So I can give some examples of mine while you're thinking. One of them is the bribery scene where Drebin tries to get information from this guy at the docks.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights.
They keep bribing each other for information. And I think Drebin actually makes money in the end. I think when you really break it down, you keep track of everything. I think he makes like $20 or something.
And that's what I mean about this. That was a smart one. I didn't expect that to happen. That was smart. Sorry, but carry on.
It starts out as a serious scene, right? We've seen that kind of scene, right? The police officer bribing somebody for information, and then they twist it, and it keeps going, keeps escalating, right? So that's a funny one. Then there's the thing about the fireworks factory, which is one of the iconic memes from this movie, where you have a sequence of events that leads up to a fireworks factory exploding, and Drebin standing in the street telling the crowd there's nothing to see here, and then the fireworks go off in the background. So there was a fine joke. The thing about the driving student is fun.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Where commandeers like this car, and it turns out to be like a driving instructor and a student, and the instructor has to coach the student through kind of doing this elaborate chase, including flipping off the trucker who cuts them off, and what like how to curse properly, at truckers and whatever. That was always fun. And I think the reason is that it's kind of got steps to it, right? Like it starts out as a normal, just I'm commandeering this vehicle. And then the joke is, oh no, here's like somebody who can't drive who now has to survive a car chase. And then it just keeps going. And by the end, you've got the thing about flipping off the trucker. So there are good jokes in this, right? But it's like a couple over the course of 80 minutes. I think that is the problem. Like the really good ones are, like you can count them on probably one hand.
The bribery one for me had to be the favorite one, because even the guy that gave the money back, he was so serious when it was like he was negotiating and at the same time trying to bribe him. The seriousness of that scene, even though it was unserious, was serious. It was funny, man. It was funny. That one was my favorite.
It's again deadpan humor, right? Mm-hmm. Like it plays out like a scene you've seen from police procedurals before, but just taken to an absurd level. And I think that is why that scene works, and that's why it still gets quoted. And
so
then other scenes not so much.
So you think there should have been more of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, like Airplane is full of these, right? Like there's very little low effort humor in Airplane, for example, and that is why it sticks with people more, and that is why I think it has more of a lasting impact.
I'll kind of reiterate the baseball pitch one again. That one probably not as clever as some of the other jokes in there. And I did like the bribery one and stuff. But that was just like one of the silly ones that, for whatever reason, just got me. And it kind of does like escalate a little bit. Not to the extent of some of the other jokes, but where he's been the singer, had to do the national anthem, and then is now having to be, I can't remember what the person's called, but the person that like kind of called if like it's out or whatever on the baseball pitch, and he's at the start, he's like trying to casually search one or two people, and then it kind of like builds up to a point where I think there's like some like argument going on, or like there's something going on in the middle of the pitch, and then he's like whilst all that's going on, he's just literally searching everyone, just like one by one, just like doing it in the most like silliest way possible, and that got a laugh out of me. Don't ask why. It doesn't make sense why, because again, I didn't enjoy much else from the movie, but that one, for whatever reason, just hit the right spot.
And there's another one as well where I think he impersonates the singer who's supposed to sing the national anthem, and he does the worst job ever. And the guy is kind of tied up in his dressing room, has to watch this guy ruin his reputation. That was funny as well. So I think Jonathan, you mentioned something that I think cuts close to why this is not quite as compelling, which is that in Airplane, both the main character and Leslie Nielsen's character were very serious, right? Like they were involved in jokes, but their character was very serious. And the Leslie Nielsen character, the doctor who has to treat all these patients who get food poisoning on the plane, that was kind of the incarnation of deadpan humor, right? Very stoic, very serious, saying the most ridiculous line with a straight face. And then the main character, whose name I've forgotten now, he has a real character arc. He's a traumatized pilot who has to overcome his baggage from the war in order to land this plane, and there's a real conflict going on, and that's kind of the skeleton on which all the different jokes are hung, right? And here, Frank Drebin is part of the joke. Like, he is kind of a buffoon himself. He's very clumsy. Every time he drives a car, it's a disaster, right? He knocks something over, or gets into an accident or something. Like, and it's like a very, very basic running gag that every time he drives somewhere, he kind of drives into a trash can or something like that, right? Or like almost runs somebody over or something. And he's also fairly clumsy, and like a lot of his physical comedy comes down to him being kind of a klutz, right? And I think that might damage kind of the deadpan nature of it, where if he didn't make any jokes and he was just like a police guy, and then jokes happened around him, I have a feeling it would land a little bit better, because he's not supposed to be funny exactly, right? He's not a funny guy, but he is kind of a buffoon.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Do you feel like that's what they're gonna do for the new Naked Gun? The reason why I say that, not because I'm sure I'm sure they don't give a damn about, no, I'm not saying they don't give a damn about public criticism, but I'm pretty sure the constructive criticism you gave there, they're not paying attention to, even though it's very valid.
I think you are right. At this point, we're a couple of weeks away from the new Naked Gun movie, right? I've seen 2 trailers, and in both of them, the Liam Neeson character is very serious, right? Like, he's involved in jokes, but he's completely serious about it. And he is like the tough, badass police guy. Like, there's this scene in the trailer where he kind of walks into this bank heist dressed as like a Girl Scout, and there's some jokes involving him wearing a skirt and stuff like that. He's still serious in that. He still doesn't crack a smile. He still doesn't do any physical comedy. He's just like a badass. And I think that is kind of like, we've not seen the movie yet, right? So this might be different in the actual movie. Normally, when I have to sit through 15 minutes of trailers before a movie, nobody reacts. People are on their phone, they're talking, even if they're watching, nobody reacts, right? Like every once in a while, somebody will react saying, "Oh, I want to see that," or "Oh, that looked terrible," or something. But there's almost never an emotional reaction. Every time the Naked Gun trailer has played, people have laughed. And then they turn to the person next to them, explain the joke, and then that person laughs. That's happened like 5-6 times now.
Oh, so
which is kind of funny, right?
I'm still confused as to, because I was watching this movie after watching the trailer for the new one coming up and seeing Liam Neeson go from a Girl Scout to Liam Neeson. So I was hoping that this movie would explain the logic behind how that was possible. and it didn't. So I'm still concerned. I still have question marks as to the physics of this universe and what the hell is going on. And I don't know whether it's in some of the later movies.
There's no law. It's just if it's funny, it works. If you expect like coherent explanations for how he can do this, how he can change size, like almost triple in size or whatever it is, it's not coming. He's just disguised as a Girl Scout, and when he takes off the mask, he's Liam Neeson in a skirt with pigtails. You either accept it or you don't. That's kind of the kind of movie this is. But like things like references, right? Like people will explain the O.J. Simpson reference as to like there's the scene where all the different cops are kind of kneeling before the pictures of their fathers who were characters in the 88 movie, asking for guidance basically. And then there's the black guy who is looking at the O.J. Simpson poster and he says, no, not doing it. Because obviously O.J. Simpson's image has changed since 1988. That's not an obvious joke, right? You have to know a couple of things to find that funny. But that's a kind of one that people then explain to the people sitting next to them, and then when they get it, they laugh. But I think it's the only trailer I've seen in years, like in theaters, where people have an emotional reaction to the trailer, and to actually find it funny. Like I've seen trailers for other comedies, and I've seen like comedy like trailers like your average Marvel movie has a couple of jokes and one-liners in it, and people don't really react. But to this, they really react. Ultimately, it's a collection of jokes, right? And the jokes either land or they don't. Like there's no overarching, like there is a story there, but the story is just there to hold the movie together. Whereas the individual jokes are what's going to be memorable about this or not, right? And here, like with the 88 movie, my problem in particular is that there's some really good jokes and a whole bunch of mediocre jokes and then a whole bunch of dead air. And kind of that is why I don't quite enjoy it quite in the same way as other comedies and especially Airplane and Top Secret.
Like I said, even though I took it differently from you guys, I definitely do hear your points. And I do definitely agree with the point about, because even when I'm like in the cinema and then obviously they're showing the trailers before the film starts, whenever the Naked Gun trailer will come on, I definitely do hear laughs in the cinema. So I'm like, oh, okay, so that's strong. That's I'm saying that's a statement in itself. And also the opinion that you made in terms of like, just still be serious and have the jokes around you, because that makes it even more funnier. Because a serious guy in a funny environment is just it's just funny. You know what I'm saying? Because it's unconventional in a way.
And a lot of the best comedies have like straight men main characters that are not funny.
Yeah.
Right? Like Parks and Recreation is an example. I think you guys have not seen that, right? But the main character is the least funny character in the show. But it has to be this way because then all the other characters get to be wacky and zany and off the wall. The story is held together by the normal person because that's the inroad for the audience, right? That's the person through whose eyes they experience the story and who they can relate to and whose actions are then more relatable because they are not wacky and ridiculous and cartoonish. And I think that might be like I'm not necessarily saying your main character in a comedy can't be funny. Like there's certainly examples that go in the other direction, but I think that has something to do with it. Like the reason Ted in Airplane is relatable is because he's got something emotionally genuine going on, and he's also not cracking jokes, right? Like he does funny things occasionally. The drinking problem joke is still the funniest thing, where he keeps spilling water when he drinks something, and he refers to it as a drinking problem. So there are jokes there, right? But like he's not a funny person himself. And I think with Drebin, I think their problem is that he is too eccentric, and he's too weird.
What are the expectations for this upcoming movie then? And do you believe if they stick true to what The Naked Gun was and what movies like Airplane were before that, do you feel like that type of comedy can work in 2025?
So like that's this old topic of they wouldn't make a movie like this anymore. And even a few years ago, I would have said, a lot of the humor in this is not really something that would land well today, right? Like at minimum, it would be picked apart, like in social media and by opinion pieces in whatever magazines or whatever. I don't know. Like it seems like from the trailer, it seems like they are just doing jokes, and fairly creative ones and funny ones at that. Like that's the test, right? Like are people laughing? Is really what it comes down to. And so far, it seems to be working. And we'll see if they can keep this up for 90 to 100 minutes.
I haven't really been looking at reactions or reviews, or I just don't really know what the expectation for the film is. However, do I feel like it'd be like a cultural impact? Just to kind of like add on the question, add on to the question. No, because I don't think there's been many movies in our time that's had a cultural impact like that. The last film or show which has had like a proper cultural impact was proper like big cultural impacts, probably Avengers or like the Game of Thrones series. And the reason why when I refer to that cultural impact, I mean like because Daniel usually says like people actually like talk about it. For example, an example of cultural impact is like when you come into work and everyone's talking about, oh, do you just see what happened on this week's Game of Thrones, etc., etc. So yeah, there hasn't really been that for film in a long time. Besides Sinners, actually, but obviously that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, so in terms of like Naked Gun, if it could have some sort of cultural impact where it can kind of like revitalize this genre, because I don't know if there's been a lot of, maybe I'm just not up to date or up to speed with if a lot of these movies have been dropping out in our time this year, last year, etc., etc. But I don't think it has. So I don't think it will have that sort of impact where people start making more of these films. Like, for example, when Paranormal Activity dropped. So after Paranormal Activity dropped, found footage films just started like constant, just kept on releasing straight after that. Of course, there was a period where Blair Witch came, and then I don't know if they started doing found footage films after Blair Witch was released. But
yeah, that started it, yeah.
Okay, cool. But yes, but obviously it died a bit, and then Paranormal Activity dropped, and then it was revitalized again. So I don't know if, for example, Naked Gun will have that impact.
So what's definitely missing is just straight comedies, right? I think the big theory or the going theory is it's not something people have to see in the theaters, where they will say, okay, like this might be good, but I'm gonna see it in 3 months on streaming, and that's good enough. I don't need to see it on the big screen. I don't need to go through the effort and expense of actually seeing it in theaters, and that is why these things have not made money in a while. And this made money, right? This has like an 11x multiplier. The budget for this was 14 million and it's made like 152 back in 1988. It's just what people will show up for has changed. And so the conventional wisdom has been people don't show up for straight comedies. The 2025 one, I don't see a budget for that. But, it's got big names attached to it and all of that. So it can't be that cheap. So it would be really interesting to see how many people actually show up for this and how many people actually enjoy it. I think this is the kind of thing that people mostly engage with in the forms of, TikTok short and YouTube shorts and whatever. Like Family Guy is similar, right? Like Family Guy is a very similar kind of comedy, but people mostly engage with it in the form of clips. And it's all very disposable, it's all very interchangeable, and nobody really cares about story or, anything beyond the immediate joke, which is not a bad thing exactly, but can you make a movie in 2025 in which that exists? Or is that a benefit because like things like Airplane and also Family Guy have gotten a real audience through the clips, right? So people who are way too young to have seen it when it was new discover these older shows like Family Guy, like 20-year-old episodes or whatever, or like the clips from Airplane from 1980. That kind of by itself gives it cultural relevance again, because you find these clips, they're hilarious, you share them, you reference them, and the references kind of stay alive in that way. So I wonder really how the Naked Gun, like the new one, will fit into that, where can it justify its budget and its theatrical release, or will it just be picked apart into clips, but it will not make any actual money? And I think that really determines whether or not there will be copycats. Like let's say it's a big hit and people like the jokes, but they only watch the jokes on TikTok and nobody makes any money from it. Who's going to try to emulate that, right?
For me, it's a shame though. It's similar to the horror genre, but the horror genre seems to work with theatrical releases where it's relatively modest budget and you can churn them out. You can churn out quite a number of these and hopefully have some of your breakout hits. I enjoy the comedy genre quite a lot, and I don't think we've had too many great comedies, and I don't think the effort is there, or the effort is being put towards making great comedy movies again. And I'm kind of hoping, even though I'm not looking forward to this one as much, I'm kind of hoping it kind of changes perspective and it changes the mindset to it, because I would love to see some more comedies in the cinema, because it seems like every time I go, all the trailers I see are just for like horror movie after horror movie after horror movie. And I don't see why. Well, I know why. Like again, comedy hasn't been making money in the box office, but it would be great for it to kind of become some type of event again that you would go to see with your friends at the cinema, and you can all go and have a laugh at the cinema. And again, these don't have to be like, this movie was an hour and 25 minutes. It's like short, sweet, to the point, doesn't need to have a complex story. And I feel like, again, like other comedies in this era of short attention spans, etc., you can just do like a nice 90-minute, 100-minute comedy, kind of get straight to the point, has a good story to it, and hopefully delivers some type of box office return for whoever was creating it. So me personally, someone that enjoys the genre, I do hope it sparks the movie execs to want to invest a little bit more into comedy, similar to what they do with horror.
And I'd also like them to do something new, like not just like, don't just make a new Naked Gun, don't just make a new Airplane or whatever. Like if this is like successful, like you can see them seeing, okay, what else can we warm up, right? And I'd like them to do just different stuff, right? Like the thing about Airplane, Naked Gun, and Top Secret is that they are spoofs of very different things. They're very similar in terms of their like sensibilities and the kinds of jokes they make, but they draw from completely different types of movies and different types of genres. And we had kind of had that with like epic movie, superhero movie, disaster movie, like all of these spoofs that kind of destroyed that kind of genre. But then that kind of tried to do something similar where it kind of drew from different areas for its jokes. And if this works out, then I think it would be nice if somebody tried that again. And just, okay, what is it people are taking seriously right now? Let's make fun of it. The trick here is, what do people actually take seriously? Because that's not that much, right?
The last good comedy that I can recall is No Hard Feelings. That starred Jennifer Lawrence. And that one, I was just kind of doing my quick Googles on it. That one made $85 million from a $45 million budget. And of course, you then have to like add marketing costs on top of that as well. So it did, I believe, turn a profit for the studio. Probably not as big as, you know, some of the horror movies would have. But I think that's like the last one I remember. And I'm probably part of the problem because I didn't go see that in the cinema. I watched that at home. Stuff like similar in that vein. Or just kind of like there's like comedy is very broad. Like there's loads of different types of fun comedy. There's like the physical, the slapstick. There's the more deadpan. There's the, you know, your Rush Hour type of comedy where it's just like, you know, just like fast lines hitting you every single moment. There's like loads of variations of comedy. So I'd like to see just people try a little bit more, try and make more funny movies that aren't just like quippy and just like one-liners. Kind of what the MCU has become, or something, an imitation of a Deadpool or something like that, or Ryan Reynolds character. Because I feel like that's where they kind of go with it as well. And it won't be a straight up comedy movie, but it'll be a movie with comedy in it, and they're just quipping and stuff like that. And it's just like, okay, like there's other ways to be funny.
In terms of what you guys are saying, this, and also Daniel's point about what the serious point, in terms of the comedy genre, like with theatrical releases, do you feel like there's some sort of comedy fatigue? Because like I said, I'm not really in tune with the comedy genre, right? That's not my go-to genre. However, I've seen like comedy movies on streaming, yeah, and a lot of comedy series, but in terms of like comedy movies in cinema, I haven't really seen that much.
That's kind of the point, that like there are very few straight comedies. Like almost all blockbusters are action comedies that are action movies first, in which people make jokes.
Yeah, but
and it's usually a very specific type of joke. It's kind of the quip, right? Like, or the snarky remark or something. And then actual comedy, like there's a couple of sitcoms that are made occasionally and they run somewhere and nobody watches them. And there's like animated comedy shows that have been running since like 1995 or whatever.
But I mean in terms of like an actual comedy film, a movie, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That is what comedy is at the moment, right? So there are not many straight up comedies made. Like 10, 15 years ago, there were a whole bunch of moderately budgeted movies full of funny people who just did something funny. And a lot of people liked them and they tended to reliably make money, and it kind of went away. And that is kind of the thing, like that is why this is notable and this is why we're paying attention to it. It's because like a straight up comedy as a movie with a theatrical release is rare. Like this does not usually get done, and that is why it's a risk, and that is why it's interesting to see how it will be received. Because if this gets received well, then it might change what gets made afterwards, right? And that is why I brought up this point of, what if people just watch the clips on TikTok, but they don't actually show up for the movie, and also people like the jokes, but they don't pay for them. Like, what then? Why would you make another one?
And you think they're not making it because comedy fatigue, or is the thing where just audiences have enough that they just don't find it funny? The
No, it's
movies that they were
streaming.
working. Sorry?
It's streaming. People are not showing up to, or in the past 7 to 10 years have not shown up to anything other than big blockbuster spectacle. The people will watch the other movies, but they'll do it at home on streaming, like 3 months later when it's on something they already have a subscription to. Like The Amateur, I watched. It feels like last week, and that popped up on Disney Plus the other day. And it's like, it still feels like I watched it a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually like more like 2 months probably. But that's very quick. And if I'm not that invested, and then I can just watch it at home, right? People have just stopped going to things that aren't big blockbuster spectacle, basically. And that seems to be changing, right? There's romantic comedies coming out now as well, right? There's one coming out, I think in August, which is just like an old school 2000s era romantic comedy about pretty people falling in love, right? And I think it's got something to do with like a relationship coach or something. It's being made again, but for 10 years people didn't make it because people didn't go. They just waited for it to hit streaming, and that killed basically anything that didn't make $400 million with CGI explosions. And that is part of why superhero movies kind of carried movies for a long time, like for the better part of a decade, because people would reliably turn out to those, because those have more of it, like by their very nature, those movies have a bigger impact on the big screen. Whereas like a romantic comedy or just a straight comedy or something like that doesn't really matter how big your screen is. Your experience will be largely the same. At least that's what most people that's how most people approach it. And so they didn't make any money on the box office, and so they tended to be made as low budget Netflix productions or something like that. But they didn't get big theatrical releases, because if they did, they would lose money. Any other thoughts on The Naked Gun before we wrap it up? Do you regret watching it, or is it just it's not as good as Airplane, therefore it's a bit of a deflation, or what? Like what's your bottom line?
I think it just wasn't for me. Didn't hit the same way that Airplane did. Just wasn't my style completely. I think it was a bit too silly, a bit too goofy, a little bit too slapstick, and too much physical comedy. And one not done well. And actually just kind of like reminded me of the movie that we watched, which was the one that the Germans watch every Christmas. And I can't remember the name of it.
Dinner for One.
Dinner for One. Yeah. In that one, again, I didn't get it at first. And it could be a similar case, but I didn't get it at first. But then we had a conversation about it where you kind of explain like the repetition, you kind of explain sort of the story behind it, and it elevated the movie. Whereas I feel like this conversation here didn't really do that for The Naked Gun. It didn't really bring it up at all. If anything, it made my feelings towards the movie a little bit worse. So yeah, it's just not as clever, not as intelligent as Airplane, and even just like as a movie on its own, it's just a little bit too silly for me, for my liking. So,
Because I had a good time with this one. I don't regret watching it. I felt the differences between this and Airplane, for example. I just felt this was more my speed and my kind of tone when it comes to the main character, because they've both felt just less ditzy. I say less ditzy because ditzy comes across for me as quite immature. So I do hear definitely the points that were made. I do agree that, there could be times where they could have been more serious though. Because I think what was going on around them would have made just the movie as a whole more funnier. Overall, I still had a good time with this one. So I am kind of looking forward to the new film that's going to come out, especially from the trailers. It seems like it's going to be good fun. So
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in between you two. It's direct competition. It's just much better. But there are good pieces in this. The problem is just the joke density is not high enough, right? There's too long periods where there's nothing funny or creative or impressive going on, and for that reason you kind of sit around waiting for the next good joke, which might be 5 minutes away. In an 80-minute movie, that's quite a lot. And that is kind of why I'm looking forward to the new one, because that's an opportunity to do basically the same thing but better, and which might sound like blasphemy, like because of how beloved Leslie Nielsen is. But like, I don't think this is the best one. I think the sequels are even worse, just in terms of the overall quality of the jokes. And I would actually recommend, if you like the idea of this but were underwhelmed by this movie, I would check out some clips from Police Squad, because there's actually a lot better stuff going on there. It's like it's got famous jokes in it, like Drebin breaks into the villain's kind of house, and the villain asks him, "Who are you and how did you get in here?" And Drebin says, "I'm a locksmith, and I'm a locksmith." That's one of the classic jokes, but that's not from the movie; it's from the show, right? And like all the iconic stuff about Naked Gun probably comes from the show. So I would recommend that if you like the idea of this, but this was a little bit underwhelming. So yeah, that's kind of my bottom line.
All right then. Well, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
If you reached this part of the episode, thank you very much for working with us. We appreciate your support as always. And if you enjoyed our discussion today, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought it was just a bunch of slapstick nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. We'll see you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.